a few weeks or maybe a month or so. The last ones I did were the Art of GMing, the Art of Game Mastering. They were like 3 parts. 2 parts were dedicated specifically to Savage Kingdoms, which is my recently designed role-playing game. It's been out not quite a year, the core rulebook. Yeah, get it on Amazon.com if you haven't already. It's only $21.70, I think, on there. The regular retail MSRP price is $24.95, which is still a really good bargain. 306 pages. And in fact, one of the only semi-negative reviews we've gotten about it, I've been pretty blessed so far, is that there's too much information in it. Which is a good problem to have, I suppose. Yeah, so there's setting material, the core rule material, all kinds of stuff in there. A nice index at the back of the book, character sheet, all your kind of normal stuff, and hopefully then some. So yeah, pick it up if you haven't. You can also get the PDF on DriveThruRPG. I think normally it's like $5.99, $4.99, but I think I lowered the price to $3.99. And the Savage Bestiary is out also, only in PDF form. I couldn't really afford the artwork for a softcover or hardcover physical book, because the Bestiary really requires that. Other books you can kind of get away with minimal artwork, but not so much the Bestiary. But anyway, that's on DriveThruRPG as well. I think it's only $1.99, or I may have lowered it to 99 cents. I think it's $1.99. Don't want to sell myself too short. That's 100 pages. Contains about, I never really counted how many creatures. I think it's about 70 to 75 creatures, and there's also NPC templates and NPC stats for major NPCs in the setting, all within a 100 or 101 page document. So pick that up if you can. And the Savage East is coming out soon. That's the first campaign expansion supplement for Savage Kingdoms that will detail the eastern and southern continent and the isle continent of Mezca across the Dragon Sea. The core book contained Astagonia, which is the western continent, the sort of core setting. So yeah, anyway, so the plugs are out of the way. I know I don't have a lot of viewers and subscribers quite yet, but I'm going to keep doing this anyway, I guess, and see if maybe I can pick up some more people, because I feel very committed, which I'm about to get into, to bringing more lore and information and teaching and tips about game mastering and role-playing in general. I've been playing since 1979, role-playing games from the original D&D, like many of us probably have, and I've designed my own game, Savage Kingdoms. I designed a couple of live-action role-playing game systems that were well-received, at least in a local, regional level. Did some freelancing, and have dabbled in writing and that kind of thing. But probably my main thing is I'm an actor. I'm a professional actor and acting coach. And I'm hoping that, I'm not hoping, I'm pretty certain, that I can bring some of those skills, those performing arts skills, to game mastering and PCing, being a player character as well. Because let's face it, as a game master and as a PC, we are, or at least should be, using a good deal of performing arts techniques, engaging your audience and committing and convicting to a role or to a scene or to a decision. And I'll quickly touch on some of these little tips. Now, these GM tips I just kind of came up with over the last week or two. There were things I think I left out of my former videos about game mastering techniques. I did 3 of them. 2 were specifically for Savage Kingdoms, GMing Savage Kingdoms in particular, and the other one was more generic for D&D, Pathfinder, Warhammer, World of Darkness, whatever, or even non-fantasy role-playing games, science fiction, Western, whatever it is. But I feel like I might have skipped over some of them or left these out, and so I just want to do these fairly quickly. All right, so number 1 GMing tip that I left out that I think is pretty important, and these are actually not in any particular order, and that's don't say probably or maybe when in narrator form as a game master. And to be more specific, that means when you are describing a scene as a narrator, not speaking as an NPC, don't use the word, or try to rarely use the words probably or maybe or will say that. I'll give you an example. So the adventurers, the PCs, are camping out in the edge of a forest overnight say in a northern realm. They wake up the next morning and you describe the great red sun begins to peer over the eastern horizon beyond the mountains. It's very cold, and as you awaken, your cold breath steams about you, reminding you of the region that you are in. You look about, and there are probably several inches of snow on the ground, and you look to your horses, and maybe they're hungry. We'll say they're hungry. Alright, so cut that scene right there. So the problem with that scene was, I said probably and maybe when I should have been more convicted and just went ahead and made it, just said it was. So instead of saying there are probably 3 or 4 inches or several inches of snow on the ground, I would just simply say there are several inches on the ground. You can be even more evocative of the setting if it's medieval fantasy, and say the snow is as deep as the length of your dagger blade, or it's a half an arrow shaft deep, or it comes up to the fetlocks of the horses. I like to do that because it gives it a relative measurement, or it's up to your ankles, or it's up to your knees. So yes, but the main point is don't say probably, or maybe the horses are hungry. You know, you could say the horses appear to be hungry, or the horses are jittering with hunger, and they're probably cold too in this case. And then what was the other one? We'll say that they're hungry. Just say it. Say that they're hungry, or leave it open. Let a PC go over and use his animal handling skills, or just basic common sense, and say, does my horse appear to be hungry? If so, I'll feed him. And then you could, why, yes, he is hungry. And then you could use an improv technique, and where it's yes and, you just add to it. I covered those improv stuff on a former video, and I'll probably do a future video that goes into using more improv and acting techniques for game mastering. But this one I just want to hit some key GMing tips I left out really quick. So yeah, that's probably, don't say probably or maybe or will say that as a narrator. Just own it. I mean, I've seen several GMs, too many really, probably, well, yeah, there's probably some moldering sacks of grain in the corner. I think there's I don't know, maybe the horse is, I don't know, I'm not sure there's a horse. Alright, so all of that is it doesn't show you to be a very strong storyteller. And moreover, it's confusing to the PCs. Or, well, is it there or is it not? I mean, let's just go ahead and just let me know, because maybe it's important. Maybe it's not. But if anything, it's important to creating the scene in their head. Remember, this is a theater of the mind venue. This is a theater of the mind based industry. Our hobby that we're doing. So you have to help that. It's theater of the mind. Whether you're using miniatures and a nice cool layout of dungeon tiles or a castle model, that's great, but that still only contributes at about 5% of what you're seeing in your head. So you have to build the rest of that with words, good old storytelling techniques, verbiage, evocative language, and pacing, and that sort of thing, and it engages the NPCs. It's as an actor, when I teach monologue technique and try to remember it myself when I do monologues when I'm auditioning for things, or even performing monologues, is to vary what it is you're saying so that it doesn't always come at the same speed. You must pull back and engage and do different things. That was way over the top. But that's part of the point. I mean, don't be afraid of being over the top. Don't be afraid of engaging the senses. And if you lower your voice and do different things with it, you'll engage those characters a lot more than just, and you walk into a 8x8 room, and there might be some moldering sacks in the corner, and there's a torch that's on the wall that hasn't been lit in 73 years. Yeah, just don't, because again, you didn't engage the people, and you also just used 73 years specifically. No one really knows that the torch hasn't been lit in 73 years. So yeah. Alright, so now, when to say probably or maybe, to add on to that, this would be like point 1b. Say, let's just, for the sake of example, the player characters, the adventurers, enter into an underground crypt. They find an underground crypt, they go into a large chamber, and it's paved in stone. It's a stone chamber, and there's no mortar between the stones, perhaps invoking an ancient feel to it, like there was an ancient race even before the current kingdom that was here first, or something. You could say, describing, you look at the right wall and you see you see tatters hanging from the wall that are probably from an ancient tapestry. Or maybe they're from an ancient tapestry. So then you could do it because you already set for a fact that there are tatters on the wall, but then you could say that might be from a tapestry. So that's okay to do it because you already set a precedent, and then you put a little aura of mystery on top of it. So then that might compel a character to go over and check it out more, using maybe some of their lore skills, maybe their perception skills for searching. Yeah. So it engaged the characters, which of course is ultimately the point. Also, okay. Number 2. That was 1A and 1B. Number 2 is saying probably or maybe, or it is said, or it is rumored to be, when in NPC mode. So though it is not good to say it necessarily always in narrator form, in fact, don't say it really at all, other than the little caveat I just gave you, it's good to do it in NPC mode, particularly if the PCs are engaging a less than higher social status or caste character. Like a tavern wench, for example. Perhaps they are inquiring about a caravan of merchants that rolled into town an hour or two ago with perhaps a suspicious bit of cargo in one of the wagons. And one of the PCs asked the tavern wench, does she know anything about it? And a good way perhaps to have her respond is, well, I'm not sure, my lord, but some say they're merchants that just came in from Azeria, a land crawling with sorcerers. I know not what they might have. I know nothing. I must go. So she said probably and maybe not, and it is rumored to be because she is of a profession that hears all kinds of gossip and rumors, but she is not of a social class to perhaps know for sure, like a high priestess or something. And even then, they may not even know, or an Azerian herself, or whatever. So that's a good time to, and this engages the characters into thinking, the players into thinking, it just adds more mystery. This is called creating an aura of mystery. And if you're running a setting that's supposed to be, and hopefully most medieval fantasy settings should to some degree, have a lot of mystery and mysticism, then that's good. That you're building your case, you're building your setting, you're building your atmosphere, you're hopefully looking awesome to your players, and ultimately they're having a good time. So that's when you would say, or it's rumored to be, maybe, I don't know for sure. I've said too much. But you could also change that language. Let's take the example of the tavern wench again. A character pulls out from his pouch a shiny silver coin, and to the tavern wench, who probably sees copper and bronze at most during the day, and pinches on the bum and flirtatious invitations is about her only reward. So a silver is a cool thing to her. Does this change your mind now, wench? Do you know any more? And suddenly she might be like, well, actually, I know for certain they are from Azeria. Blighted sorcerers, and in fact one of them might be a sorcerer. He spoke with a strange creature in a cage on the back of one of the wagons. It had red eyes, I think, and he spoke strange words, and the creature seemed to do his bidding. But that's all I know. So suddenly, from the silver coin, the scene changes. She seems to know more, and maybe again she could be lying, but in any case, she said more stuff. And this invokes the characters more, like, oh, cool, there might be a sorcerer. There's a creature in a cage with red eyes. Cool, what could it be? And this forces him to use more. I'm going to use insight to see if she's lying, or I'm just going to assume she's telling the truth. Let's go investigate. Or, oh wow, that's creepy. I want nothing to do with it. Let's just keep drinking our drinks. So this just opens up all kinds of possibilities, which is the point. All kinds of branches are already coming off of the main scene. So that's when to see. Probably, maybe it is said. Then it is said. It is whispered. Many have said. Old tales say that. Alright, so number 3, kind of what I was going on there. Use evocative or period language. So, for example, I'll use a couple of players, I won't say any names, but a female player once. She was actually a really good player, but she wasn't really well versed in, I guess, medieval history or something. So she once described her character as trying to find a motel. And so I just kind of nicely said, an inn. Perhaps you want an inn, or maybe a house, or maybe a kinsman would let you crash, stay the night in your house, or if it's just a cold drink you want, maybe a tavern's what you're looking for. So I gently reminded her that they weren't really called motels back then; they were inns. But the point is, I knew what she meant, and all was well. But going to my point is that using evocative language or period language really does help to instill in the player's head, and your head as well, the setting. So I will often, Savage Kingdoms is set more in a Dark Ages, ancient world setting, as opposed to high Middle Ages setting like most fantasy games are. So I will often evoke a lot of things that bring that imagery to mind, such as iron chains, or the roll of wooden wheels, or there's livestock in the streets, and that sort of thing. Certain smells. I'll get to that in a second, actually. Well, no, actually, this is what we're talking about right now. No, actually, it'll be next, engaging all the senses. But yeah, I'll deliberately describe words. I'll try not to use modern words. I mean, sometimes you have to, obviously. But in general, I'll try to use evocative or quote, period, unquote language. And again, that just helps everyone immerse themselves more into the setting. Okay, next is engage all of the senses, which I just sort of teased a little bit there. This is, of course, the 5 standard physical senses of sight, smell, hearing, touch, and taste, and also the less classical sense of the 6th sense. Empathy and insight, that sort of thing, intuition. So if you have make sure in your descriptions to use all the senses. I used to even keep a little post-it note on my GM screen. It would actually list all the senses on there. I would also put write down the words weather, and what it did remind me to engage all the senses when describing things, but also to remember the weather or the moon phase. Because it helps paint a picture in people's heads, and certain characters sometimes have skills, abilities, or spells, or things that run off of the moon or the sun, their specific time, or the solstices or the equinoxes. So, but yeah, so in modern society, we rely so much on our sight. Modern humans have developed sight as our primary sense, but there's still those other 4 that are very important. Often on a more nuanced, subtle level. For example, smell is the most potent smell, even more than sight, for triggering the memory. It's more rooted in memory. Taste is associated with smell, so therefore it also evokes a lot of memories. So try to use those. So describe how the food tastes, or the wine, especially if it's an outlander who's taken in and smitten by all these strange things, or the sounds. If your character is from a quiet monastery setting and suddenly enters a noisy bazaar, and it's "Ah, my lord, over here, over here!" And there's animals, and there's somebody screaming, and "Hola, hola, hiya, hiya, over here!" And or different languages are being chattered, and maybe a runaway horse streaks by, and at the same time there's a child pickpockets one of the characters, or tries to, and so several crazy things could be just hitting them all at one time in a setting such as a bazaar, and all the senses could be engaged. Sight and smell. You smell the smell of spices and cinnamon and curry, or just overwhelming. Or you smell the fish from the fish market, or from the harbor that's nearby. The salt sea air, that sort of thing. The fungus of underground and the moldy mildew smell. So just and battle too can get really nasty, but it can also get very evoking. The blood and feces and just stuff, and rot afterwards, and the crows picking at the bodies, and the wolves circling around nearby, waiting, and so don't be too afraid. I mean, you don't want to get super graphic to where people are grossed out and they don't want to play your game anymore, but at the same time, they are here to play a fantasy, possibly a dark fantasy game, so don't be afraid to do some of that. because that's why they're here. Otherwise, they'd be off watching a movie or playing Monopoly or playing a, God forbid, a computer video game or something like that. So honor your audience, your player characters, and give them what they're really here for. So yeah, engage all the senses. All right. So next point number was 5. Play NPCs and creatures to win. In other words, to make them real. And this is another sort of acting thing. There's kind of an old acting technique and called play to win. So every scene that you are in as an actor, you are playing it to win. In other words, your character has a goal to accomplish in every single scene. This is called scene work when we rehearse for plays or for movies or whatever. In other words, your character, you, just like you are in real life, we are all, I hate to say this, but we're all kind of the center of the universe, right? As much as we love others and put them first, which we should, ultimately, because our consciousness is in here, we are the center of our own world. So the character should be that way too. So whenever you're in a scene, whether it's an NPC or PC, generally you're playing to win. You think what you have to gain or what you have to say here means a lot. It's worth something. So when you're playing NPCs or monsters or creatures, play them to win. In other words, make them real. Don't just have them, they're not just a set of stats to be killed or scared away or sold or whatever. Or an item, objects aren't just to be, well, that's 30 gold pieces. It's like, well, it's its own thing though, let's honor it. So yeah, so I guess that's what I'm saying is like honor your NPCs, make them real, make them to win. Don't make them pushovers unless the character's supposed to be. Sometimes it's good though to have a character that's a total wimp, pushover, a craven character because you want to create varied NPCs. But for the most part, make the NPC play to win, and this also goes from player mentality, and I'm not putting down players because I am one and we all are to some degree. A lot of players will belly up to the table assuming that it's all about my character and about us, and I'm going to bully that NPC around, and they really do try to bully NPCs around until they come to Savage Kingdoms when they realize that doesn't always work. In fact, often it doesn't work because I play my characters to win, and there are also some badasses in that setting. And all settings should be that way. They're badasses, so don't have the NPC cower. Don't have him come quietly always, or she come quietly. Make them play to win. This is particularly true with villains. And again, this is an acting thing as well. Play your NPC or villains. They don't think they're evil. Nobody really, unless you're insane, unless you're Charles Manson or someone, even Hitler, I don't think thought he was evil. They don't think they're evil. They're not a villain. They are very convicted and committed to what they're doing. So play the NPC that way. Another cool thing about villains is give them a soft side. Give them, because they're supposed to be, they're real people. Unless it's something like a demon, which in Savage Kingdoms and probably most other worlds are literally creatures of the net. They literally are. They have no sense of salvation. In other words, but even then, you can play around with them and make them have something that's almost touching in a way. But anyway, for most human characters, most human villains, they're real. They think they're doing the right thing. Another good example is a Game of Thrones. One of the coolest thing about that series, be it book or cable series, is that there are very few real villains and very few real heroes. They're all gray characters, and that makes them so much more interesting because they go through this arc, this road, another thing in acting, what we call your arc, your character arc, your through line, and that's your character's journey and how that character is thinking and perceiving things through its journey. So yeah, do that with villains. Make them real people. They have real weaknesses and real flaws, but also real strengths and real convictions. And 99% of the time, they think what they're doing needs to be done. It's nothing wrong with it. That 1% maybe are the crazy maniacs that want to see the world burn, as to quote Joker and Batman, I think. But which is fine. A villain like that every once in a while is cool too. But for the most part, most villains should be played to win and played to be real. Just like the bear in the woods protecting its cubs from the player characters trying to hunt it. I mean, do what the bear would do. It's going to protect its young. It's a thing. The PCs are nothing to it. On one hand, honor and respect your players for being there. They're probably your friends or at least acquaintances, but don't patronize them. Don't over patronize them, because nobody, at least mature players, don't like that. We want to be challenged. So challenge the characters and engage them, and that goes to using all the senses, making your NPCs real, make them play to win, etc. Things that I've covered. Alright, so the next thing is, because this thing is running as always longer than I thought, and I probably won't edit it, even the F word that I used earlier. Number 6, use improv techniques. Let the players expound within reason. I already did a bunch of that improv technique video that 12 people probably saw, and maybe I'll do another one. But just to touch on it really quick, that's the old yes and. I know there's a lot of stuff out there about it, but I'm going to give a caveat to that because there's almost too much of that going around. So a player asked, are there torches on the wall? Why, yes. That's the improv technique of not only agreeing but adding to it. Adding to it would be, why, yes, and in fact they appear to have been lit about a quarter of an hour ago if you investigate. So not only did you establish your torches on the wall, but you now established they were lit currently. So now it's like, who was here? Why were they lit? So you expounded upon that. Expounded and expanded. So yeah, so let the players build when they need to, but going back to the first thing I said about probably maybe, be convict and describe what's there, and if you want to let them add to it, they can do it within reason, and again within period. There's not going to be an old Atari computer in the corner if it's a Dark Ages setting, unless you have some weird time travel stuff going on, which is perfectly fine. But my point is, don't do it just randomly. Do it for an actual reason. Yeah, so improv techniques, that's one of the, and there's many, but that's one of them. It's also listening to people. Let the PCs give you an idea. I almost deliberately put myself occasionally in a situation, in an adventure or a game session, to where I actually am not quite sure what this object is or what room this was or what old, and just by listening to the PCs talk about, oh, it could be the ancient temple of Chai-Sheng. I've heard of the ancient celestial god of harmony, and another says, oh no, it's clearly one of the Sand Lords was buried here in ancient. So I'm just taking this in, going, oh yeah, these are some really cool ideas. Let's have it be that one. Might even roll randomly, or I might combine all of those, or I can have it be none of those at all that they suggest. And again, it's your choice, but you're listening to people to give yourself options, and that's all improv is about. It's about options, expounding, and making quick decisions, and just rolling with it. So, right. The last thing is engage your PCs vocally and facially. Don't seem bored. Ramp your voice up when necessary. Pull back when necessary, like the monologue technique I was talking about. Hit key points, etc. So, engage your PCs vocally. So, in other words, use bold italics when you must, and just regular font when you must. So hit different things, or if something at you and goes, and you can do that. Don't be afraid. If you're overly shy, you might be wanting to look for a different hobby. But I know not everyone is a performer, but you can use some of these techniques at least to some degree. And don't seem bored. I saw a GM the other day. It was just like, and he was like reading. And first of all, he's reading text script, boxed text from a published adventure, and that's fine. But the thing is, I could do a whole video on that. Don't read it verbatim. I mean, try to put your own spin on it. Or if you are reading it verbatim, do it as a cold reading monologue technique, and that is to hit different words, put beats and pauses, and pull back, and maybe change the language just a little bit. But anyway, so he was just like, and corner of the room, there is a 3x3 chest. It looks like it is made of wood. There is an iron lock upon it. And it's like, he was like half asleep and his hand was propped. This is the body language of, bored. So if the GM is doing, if he's playing an NPC that's supposed to be bored, or it's like, tell me your problems, then that's fine. But if you're doing it in narrator form as GM, then it looks lazy and you will make your players bored. And if you yawn, they're going to yawn. You may not even yawn in that technique, and they may yawn anyway. So you don't always have to be in their face, because that gets annoying too, but just be engaged and make it look like, if it's not interesting to you, it's not going to be interesting to them. And that's another acting thing. If you aren't convinced that your character is awesome or that the show you're in is great, then it's going to read to the audience, most likely, at least to some of them. The more astute ones will pick up on it. What was the other stuff I said in there? Ramp your voice up when necessary, and pull back. Kind of went over that. Don't seem bored. Use your God-given vocal talents if you must. You don't always have to do an accent or anything like that, but do the different voices. If you can't do an accent, you can just simply make your voice higher for like a child or a woman or just a weird guy. Or lower it, using just your same voice, but just lower it down. Actually, I have a show tonight on stage, so I have to kind of be careful. But anyway, you can do stuff like that. Or just put pauses in your words, and different things, and use your face in various ways, and let's see what happens. Perhaps sometime when I play an NPC and I just start doing different things, and suddenly I have this weird character that comes out. And those characters become memorable. Like, the PCs will be like, oh, it was that dude, oh, that guy was awesome, or that guy was entertainingly annoying, or whatever. Again, it's all about engaging them, making them have fun, they like your game, you're awesome, etc. They're awesome. So pull back when needed, hit key points. So that's kind of what I said with the different voice stuff. You can, if you are reading text block stuff, or even creating your own narration, just like when you read text, there's a reason bold type exists and italic type exists. When it's away from the base font, it's because it's pulling out key points or bullet points. So verbally you can do that. Hit key points. It's like the corner of the room. It's a man wearing an emerald cloak, and maybe that's a little cheesy, but hopefully you got their attention. That emerald cloak. You might be an emerald harper. They're like legendary harpers, bards, minstrel travelers. They have great information. They're great performers, etc. Or you see a man with a purple jewel in his great sword. It appears to be a purple jewel. So, that's Sir So-and-so. That's his ancestral sword that he carries. It has the amethyst set in it or whatever. So yeah, there's different ways of doing that. Or if they are getting bored and you feel yourself getting monotone, you're just like blah blah blah, which I tend to do sometimes, and then you can just suddenly go, and then suddenly the innkeeper brings forth a tray of food. So it doesn't always have to be suddenly, and then the giant wing thing swoops down and grabs you. It can be suddenly, and then a mundane thing happens. The point being is that you hopefully got people's attention, again, from your monotone, or if people were texting and looking at their cell phones, which is a whole different thing. Anyway, it's a way to break the monotony and to kind of bring everyone's focal attention back to Ulta. Anyway, that's all I have, because this thing went further than I thought. We're at like 34 minutes. I was really trying to shoot for 20. But anyway, hopefully that was helpful. I need to save my voice for a show tonight anyway. Thank guys for listening and watching. Hopefully I can get these videos out more. More support Savage Kingdoms and role-playing in general. The Savage East will be out soon. That's the first campaign expansion supplement book, which will detail the eastern and southern continents of culture and cultures of the known world of Savage Kingdoms. Until next time, I'm Mike with Fire in the Head Productions and Savage Kingdoms, and happy adventuring.